What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 310. Tonight, we have a very special guest joining us. Mirna Valerio is going to be joining us on the show. We had her on a guest, episode number 295. It was a wonderful episode. She's a fantastic voice in this community. And obviously, there's a lot going on in the world that we can't ignore it. And so part of tonight's episode is going to be dedicated to talking a lot about things that I personally am very uncomfortable talking about, especially live and publicly. And I think that's exactly why we need to do it.
Correct.
Our guest tonight is just wonderful in that she wanted to join us tonight on the show. And we're very thankful to have her on. So Mirna is going to be joining us in just a second. But we're also very thankful to have you here. Ginger Runner Live, episode 310 will begin right now.
Ginger Runner.
What is going on, everybody? We're probably not starting the show as we typically do today, and that is for very good reason. There's too much going on in the world to completely ignore what's going on out there, and there's rightful protests. There's a lot of things that we need to talk about, and I felt that tonight's show, it wouldn't do our community justice. It wouldn't do anyone any justice if we just sat here and pretended like nothing was going on. I think we've been doing that a little too long. So we want to talk a lot about things that are uncomfortable to talk about tonight. We have a wonderful guest who agreed to come on the show to enlighten us. Basically, I feel like our job is to listen and to learn. And Mirna Valerio, a previous guest of the show, is going to join us tonight. And we're just honored and thankful to have her come back to our show and offer a voice. If there's anything we can do with this platform, it's to lift these voices. And that is exactly what we want to do tonight. Go ahead.
We're also just excited to catch up with Mirna.
To be totally honest,
it's been a while. A lot has happened since we last chatted.
We've listened to that episode. We had her on episode 295. We have listened to it since, obviously, many times, but
it was not that long ago.
Not that long ago, wow. But a lot has changed.
Yeah.
This was pre-quarantine, pre-COVID, pre-everything, pre-George, Ahmad, everyone. So we're excited to have her back to kind of catch up, but also to talk about a lot of things that maybe are difficult to talk about. We're going to introduce her immediately here. We just want to get right into it. But of course, at the top of every show, we do have individuals we like to thank, our Patreon supporters. And it's because of them that we're able to do these shows and the content on this channel. This channel exists because of our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/thegingerrunner. We appreciate each and every one of you. Brian Sands and Chris Lee at that top tier are two incredibly inspiring individuals that also help continue to support the rest of the community as well. And finally, for the last few weeks and for the next couple of weeks, we have been sponsored by Sufferfest, and we, of course, are drinking Sufferfest beer tonight. Mirna is awesome. She's she might be, I don't know if she's having a glass of wine. On the last episode, she had a glass of wine with us, but we want to just take a second to, we will be donating the fee that they are paying for sponsorship of this episode, and we will be donating it tonight, of course, to the Minnesota Freedom Foundation and Freedom Fund. It's the least we can do, and I really honestly just want to introduce our guests. But we have a live chat room.
We do have a live chat room. What's up, everyone that's watching live? Welcome if you're new to the show. Welcome back if you're a regular here. There's already some great dialogue happening in the chat room. A lot of people are just very excited to see Mirna again because it has been a while. And I think everyone's just ready.
Yeah, and
I was just going to remind people that because we are live, if you do have questions or if you want to interact with Mirna, please pop your comment or question into the chat room.
Talk about voice that lifts others up. Mirna is one of the best. Without further ado, welcome back to the show, Mirna Valerio, also known as the Mirnavator.
Yay.
Hey, Mirna.
Hey, y'all.
I have the last couple of days. Obviously, this has all kind of happened very rapidly, where I emailed you just asking if you could come back on the show, and you were very receptive, like, yes. I have been thinking, like, how the hell do we start a show like this? I don't have an idea of how to start the show. I'm not going to say that the show is going to teach everyone everything, but you're one of those people that I have looked up to. Kim and I have looked up to for so many years. You're just such an inspiring voice in the community and stuff like that. So this is something that I feel like we're going to talk about things today that probably make a lot of people uncomfortable. That's the point. I think I want to just come out and say that I'm happy to have you here, and I'm very honored that you would join us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've actually turned down a lot of podcasts, interviews in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because, I needed some time to process things on my own. But I want to tell you about my day.
Please.
My day has been my day, despite the world burning around us, and despite the awfulness that is around us. I took today mostly as a self-care day, for obvious reasons, right? I am a Black person living in the United States, and perhaps more importantly, I'm a Black person living in a predominantly white state of Vermont. Well, that happens to be pretty progressive, but not everyone's progressive. So this morning, I got up. I had physical therapy because I'm injured. We can talk about that later. And then I had a professional dream analysis done. And which was fantastic, and I'm still reeling from it.
What does that entail? I haven't heard of this.
Well, there's a whole industry of people who have been professionally trained to interpret your dreams, and a lot of it's just most of it's based on real psychology and stuff. And so the woman that did my dream analysis, her name is Natalie Miller. And she said, there's a theory called Gestalt theory, where every symbol in your dream is a part of you speaking to yourself. And it means it makes so much sense. And so what you do is you go through this process of embodying the different parts, the different elements in your dream as those things, speaking to yourself. And then you speak yourself as in my dream, it was a theater, it was a backstage, it was a green room. So you have to embody the green room. You have to embody all the people that are in the green room. You have to embody the score that you're looking at. I'm a musician, just in case you didn't know. And it was, my mind was so blown. And so, and I had thought it was an anxiety dream, but really what everything, as we talked about, my dream was, was that I was in a backstage, and it was opening night of the show. And I wasn't dressed. I wasn't ready. I didn't know my music. I looked at the score and I couldn't read it. And then the person who was the director, who happened to be this person that did my dream analysis, I ran up to her and I found her after I was looking for her for a long time. And then she looks at me with no expression and says, I'm like, I'm not ready. I don't know what to do. She looks at me, marks at the score, gives it to me, and said, you have 25 minutes. And that was a dream. And so, and all in all, like, it turned out to be all of these messages about imposter syndrome and, the way my brain thinks, and that when I went up to this woman in the big cavernous space that she was in, it was a quiet space where I could actually work and focus and be ready. And so mind blown this morning. That was this morning. And then I had a voice lesson. The voice lessons are, I'm a musician. I went to Juilliard Pre-College, Oberlin Conservatory of Music as a vocal performance major. And so I've been studying music again, and that has been just such a balm to my soul. I really needed it today. And this woman also happens to be a healer. so I had some healing work done today. I mean, I was not planning on that. I wasn't planning for my mind to be blown, but turns out I really needed it, because I really needed the space to kind of process everything. I'm trying my best not to look at the news. But I hear things. I'm on social media. I do work on social media, so I am there. I know what's going on. I know what just happened with the military being deployed. squash protests, and so that makes me very angry. But now it turns out the space that I needed, I got right at the right time, and this. And I cannot protest. I don't protest, but I do educate, and I do form community, and I do facilitate conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice, and that causes and those classes and those workshops and those seminars cause people to, if they don't change, drastically, they may change one thing. They may change the way they react to someone, the way they interact with someone, the way they perceive someone, and the way they receive someone. And so I'm ready. My mind is clear. I have more than 25 minutes to prepare. And I know that I will. And so that is where I am today. And then I just had some cookies. So my self-care.
We caught Mirna eating cookies as soon as we jumped on the Skype call together. And I think all of us just went, oh, man. Like, I think we all just wanted a little bit of something like that right now. Just a little bit of escape, I guess. But I guess I do want to ask, when I emailed and reached out and asked to have you join this conversation on this show today, did it feel like an obligation? Did it feel like my worry as a white guy is that this is going to be one of those moments where I'm asking for my education and that sort of thing? Did it feel like that, or are you getting that right now?
No, I'm getting a lot of that. I'm getting a lot of it, but I'm also, and your email was like, we already have an established relationship. Right. And so you're not just coming out of nowhere asking me to teach you. I've gotten a lot of that, which is why I created my course and I'm charging for it. Mm-hmm. But no, I didn't feel that from, but it's fun. I've, a lot of DMs on Instagram. Hey, would you mind telling me what books that I should read just today? But then two of the people that asked that came back with, I'm sorry. Here I am asking you to do labor that I can do myself. And so that has been really, really important. And also today and yesterday, I've been reached out to by several people just as a check-in, hey, thinking about you. I hope you and your family are well, and so that has been incredibly important to me. I kind of wish, it didn't take this to happen for people to be aware of what's happening to and within Black America. And so, but I'm glad that outreach is happening at all now.
It's, I'm guilty of it, 1,000% of not using my platform to vocalize the voices that need to be vocalized. And that was something that in the last just week it was clear that I can sit silent and continue to do what I do, which is attempt to uplift people and entertain. But the reality is, what's going on around the world is by no means something we can ignore. And it's hard for me to vocalize what, because one, I know I'm privileged from the day I entered this world. And it's difficult to realize that my last 38 years have just been that privileged. And I'm sitting here over the course of this weekend watching what's unfolding and listening to the flashbangs a mile from our house and realizing this shit is real and it has been real. And what can I do? And I think there's a lot of people that are going to watching now, that are wondering what they can do. And I'm not saying the answer to that, but I hope that this conversation at least is something,
or at least encourages people to want to talk about it more as well, without feeling the struggle of, maybe I don't have the right words to say, but I want to support. Do I just sit silent? There's even a couple of people in the chat room saying I have questions for Mirna, but I just don't know how to say it. So
everybody take a deep breath. I do. I just want to say that I appreciate the opportunity to use your platform to maybe do a little bit of education, but also to encourage people to utilize the interwebs, because there's a lot on the interwebs. There's so many shared documents and articles. That is definitely a place to start. There's the one Google Docs that has all of these articles, and then it lists like all the books and all the conversations and the YouTube, all of the
all these
resources
links and everything, yeah.
that can get you started. But I would say that before you even read and before you delve into your research on the internet or at a library when libraries open, or buying books at the bookstore, your local bookstore, the thing that is one of the most crucial things is to acknowledge that white supremacy ideals exist. Like, without question, it is not a matter of opinion. And that is all based on research and data and history and real lived experiences of every single Black person, every single person of color, and white people in the States and in other places in the world. But we're talking about the States right now. So to acknowledge that white supremacy is real, to acknowledge that white privilege is real, and actually to do some research on what white privilege is. People hear the term and they're like, oh, well, I don't have privilege because I'm poor. It is not just about socioeconomic class. It's not just about that. There are a lot of factors, or a lot of things that factor into any kind of privilege, but the one that people benefit the most from is skin color privilege. And when you are swimming in it, when that is your culture, when that's what you have grown up in, it's very hard to see that. It's very hard to be an observer in that. And so I would definitely say those two things are extremely important to acknowledge and to know. One of the things I talk about, in my work as someone in work in equity and inclusion, is knowing your identity. I hear lots of white people say, "Oh, well, I don't have culture. I don't have a culture." They think of culture as being something outside of the white community, something external, where when you learn that, as a white person, you have a culture, and that might be a different culture than another white person. And it's not, nothing is this is a big monolithic group. Whiteness is not even monolithic. So, when you start examining that part of yourself, and knowing that your perspective as whoever you are is informed by your race, it is informed by your ethnicity, and, race is a social construct, but it's here. All of that, your life is informed by all of your identities. Again, race, ethnicity, your socioeconomic status, your faith system or belief system, your profession, your access to education, whether or not you have an accent, whether or not you speak a different language. I use my husband as an example all the time. My husband's from West Africa, and from the country Burkina Faso. So he speaks like someone from Burkina Faso. And so people might approach him differently because he has an accent. We don't always realize we are doing that. Humans, we're conditioned to hear the differences, and to see the differences. And that's fine. That's fine. That's what we do as human beings. But we also have the intellectual capability to go beyond that. And that's not something that everyone has to practice. People of color practice it every day. We talk about race every day. Everything is race-based. But the thing is that, for many white people, not all, when you have not experienced walking into a store and being followed in your own neighborhood, even though you go into that store every single day. When you have not experienced having to tell your son to take his hands out of his pockets, because all kids walk with their hands in their pockets, but don't put your hands in your pockets. Don't have a hood on. Don't look suspicious, whatever that means. Don't have like eyes like that. I don't even know how to say that in words. Or don't raise your voice. Or like behave this way if you encounter, if you get pulled over. Don't raise your voice. Don't make any sudden movements because you will not get the benefit of the doubt. And that is the absolute 100% truth for people that live in this country. And when you are someone who has never experienced that, it's hard to see and it's hard to believe. And so what we as people of color, again, I cannot speak for everybody, but I know that this is experience for a lot of us. When we tell our stories and people don't believe us, or they delegitimize our stories, or they gaslight us, or they question whether or not it was actually something else. Well, maybe they were just concerned about blah 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 blah. It takes a huge toll on a community, and the reason that shit is burning right now is because we've had enough. And people now, one of the silver linings of COVID is that now people have the mental space to see and process. It's not just people of color, but white people too. We're home. Many of us are, we're still working, but we're working from home. And that gives us a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more time with ourselves. And also thank God for social media and for phones that record.
Yeah.
And so, without those things, without this confluence of events, I don't think the reaction would be quite what it is today. Whether you perceive it as violent or not. So that's where we are. And there are a lot of things that I didn't say, but I did get a little fired up.
The other thing is, we don't expect to be fully educated here, because just going back to the beginning of kind of what you were saying is like that is up to us to do our own education. And I do also want to remind everyone that Mirna was an educator for 18 years, a teacher. You are also currently offering a course in what is it? A beginner's guide to racism.
Tell us about the course.
Yeah, please.
Tell us the actual title.
Please, because it's a great title.
Wait, the media title or the?
No, give us the one that you came up with when you created it.
Wait, because I came up with both titles. The official title is Introduction to Identity, Social Justice, and Anti-Racism. I was a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the last school that I worked at. So that is, where a lot of my professional training is, and facilitating, creating community, and giving people tools to go about and do the work of social justice in any way that they can. So that is the clean title.
I love it.
Course that just opened. I just did a soft launch last night, and then it sold out this morning. And then I had to open up more spaces. So there are a couple more spots left. It's June 16th and June 18th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern on both nights. It is interactive. So the expectation is that you participate in the conversations and discussions. You cannot sit by and just listen, because we don't have time for that. And it's $200 per household. So get your kids 14 and up or 13 and up, and your roommates, your spouse, your partner, and sit and come and do some learning and do some thinking, some examining of our privilege. And this course is specifically for people in the white community. But we will be facilitated. I have a facilitator two white facilitators. One was a colleague of mine who has done some incredible work in equity and in anti-racism. Another is a woman who is an artist, and she's also like a theological student, a student at Union Theological Seminary, and she has done some incredible artwork. And is director of an organization called Making Conversations. And then I have one of my former students who was the president of my inclusion initiative at the school that I was last at, Raven Gap Nacoochee School in Georgia. And then I have a new colleague of mine who is a PhD in inclusion and equity. She actually works at UMass Boston. And she's also a diversity consultant. And so she will be leading the charge on anti-Asian racism, because that is also a huge issue right now during COVID. And so we'll have a very lively discussion. We'll talk, we'll do some scenarios, and we'll step away with a couple of strategies you can use immediately to help dismantle white supremacy.
I encourage anyone who's watching right now to follow up with this, because I can only imagine how great it's going to be.
And also go and pay to get the education.
Yep. Without a doubt.
There's a comment from Winifred in the chat room. Winifred says, an absolute immense thank you to Mirna for your energy. I can't imagine how tiring this must be to be a teacher to all of us. And I just wanted to acknowledge this. And Andrea also in the chat room says, hi, Mirna. As a fellow runner in POC, I just wanted to say thank you for your voice. But I also wanted to acknowledge that using your voice can be so draining. I want to know how you're taking care of you.
Great question.
Normally, one of my things that I do is I drink wine at night, and I have taken wine off. I've taken off of wine for the next week or so I can have lots and lots of clarity and not be fatigued in the morning, so I can get to the work of fighting racism. And, I happen to live in a community that is beautiful, that is not very crowded. It's also progressive. They had a little march last night or yesterday, and everyone chalked the sidewalks. And across the street from me is a Black Lives Matter flag. So I look at that whenever I'm working, and also 2 American flags too. And I have a bike. I'm injured now, so I've been riding my bike. I have a bike lesson tomorrow. So I'm doing the things that I need to do for myself, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I'm sleeping, and I'm really trying to stay off, keep the TV off, and then only utilize social media when I need to. And I'm filling my course too. That's self-care. Thank you so much for the comments and questions.
It's obviously been a while since we've talked, and a lot has gone down. How has Vermont changed, I guess? Last we talked with you, you were getting training in snow, and it was...
And getting excited about a year of travel.
Snowshoeing and travel. There's so much that shifted since we last spoke. I'm curious,
was it
back.
that long ago that we spoke? I mean, what month was it?
I think it was 3 months ago.
15 episodes. So it would have been... just over 3 months.
Somewhere around 3 months.
I
guess it was...
No, January. Oh my God. What month is it? It was before COVID, but it was winter.
I think it's January. No, January. I think it's June now.
I think that's correct.
April was 10 years long. May was about 6 years long.
February 17th.
February 17th.
Oh, wow.
So it really was just before everything started happening.
Just before.
In regards to COVID, anyways.
It was right before I was about to head out to Utah, I think, to co-host one of my retreats. I mean, I'm holding space for all of those that have been affected by COVID, because it's awful. It's awful, 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 awful. But, again, another silver lining, of if there can be a silver lining, there needs to be another word for that. Is just the time that I've had to be at home, and my husband came up back from New York because no one's working. Well, in his work anyway. And so like I get to hang out with my husband and my son, who doesn't like simultaneously like doesn't want to be around us, but like wants to be around us all. And so, we've been biking together, running/walking together, just having conversations, and I've been able to sleep. And so now like I'm like energy, I'm filled with energy, and I'm like existential dread plus energy.
Right.
And so whoa, wow. It feels like really long ago that we spoke, but actually it wasn't that long ago. But yeah,
we've been talking on this show, I think February, March. Was it April? That felt like forever.
March was like 4 or 5 years long. I'm
March,
sure of it.
March was a couple years long. It really was.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Go ahead. Yeah, we do have some live questions. Go ahead. Sorry.
Let's see. Okay, so a question from Deb in the chat room. Deb says, Mirna, I don't know how to use my words correctly, but do you feel part of racism or prejudice has come from a lack of integration of different cultures?
That's a really interesting question. Lack of integration of different cultures. I think that racism is built on a notion of superiority, right? And a result of that is that the dominant culture, as a culture, and I'm not talking about individual people or persons, but the culture and the system requires, in order for that superiority and inferiority to happen, that cultures are on the margins, that cultures outside of that main dominant cultures are on the margins. And that is how racism works. That is how white supremacy works. And so when you have that system in place, it's really hard. And when we're all swimming in it, we're all swimming in the river of that. It's hard to see other cultures as valid, as legitimate, as important. And so it's not so much, I don't know if the question was it like willing integration or willing disintegration of cultures, but like there's in white supremacy, there's no room for other cultures. And so, but there are definitely areas and things that we do as a society to really try to dismantle that and really try to welcome and honor and legitimize, other cultures outside of white culture. Again, this is not specific white people. This is just the culture that we are steeped in. I don't know if that answers her question, but that's a huge question, and I'm going to have to do some more thinking on that. It's a great question too. So thank you for that.
If she has a follow up to drop it into the chat room, we can always follow up with that as well. I kind of want to bring this to running, obviously, running channel and everything like that. And Mirna's been an incredible inspiration for so many in the running space, ultra space, trail running space.
Sorry to interrupt. Deb just chimed in in the chat room, and she says, "Thank you, a good, insightful answer
on the question."
Yeah.
This is something that we've sort of been seeing in the last week. Is certain voices are making themselves known and calling themselves out on their silence. And we're seeing the running community come together and also divide, in the sense that some people are speaking out, some are not, some are purposefully not, or
some are speaking out about companies speaking out, or brands speaking out.
What is the term that I got called out for?
Virtue signaling.
Virtue signaling. Like there's all these things. Have you experienced racism in the trail running community, in the ultra space? Is this something that has been there, that is hopefully now something that we can look at and identify?
Now, if you're talking about overt racism, like where, a lot of people think racism, they picture racism as like the KKK, that kind of racism, or people calling me the N-word. I've had that happen, not necessarily not in the trail running community, like just living my life. So first of all, the important thing is to realize that racism looks like that, but most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it looks like, getting pulled over, or it looks like somebody saying some bullshit to you, and being microaggressive. Oh, well, you speak really well. Like, why? You're so articulate. And lots of people don't even know that is a very, very biased, it's a racially biased comment. And I'm going to leave it to you to do that research, but I'm just going to tell you that it is. Something like that. Oh, or they see someone who presents as Asian and speaks English. Oh, your English is so good. Like, what do you do with that? Or where are you from? Where are you really from? Mm-hmm. Those types of questions, that's also racism. It's ethnocentrism. There's just ignorance too. And so, racism takes many, many, many different forms. So while I have not experienced the overt racism within the trail running community, I always, when people say things to me, I'm also fat. So people are like, whoa, wow, right, wow, and they're sometimes surprised to see me, and so like sometimes, things are, if you've ever heard of, intersectionality, like the various parts of my identity, my gender, my size, that's a part of my identity, my race, my education level of what I choose to do with my leisure time activities, like all of those things intersect to create, who you see. And so like, there's always a reaction. I always say I stick my big black ass into places where people think I don't belong. And, and so there's also this concept of, spaces that are deemed to be white spaces. Like, even though no one says it outright, when you talk about the outdoors, who do you immediately have in mind? You don't have me in mind. You don't have someone my size. You probably don't have somebody my race in mind when you think of doing stuff in the outdoors. You might think of like an LL Bean family. And I love to shout out to LL Bean. I love LL Bean. One of my collaborative partners. But when people are like, "Oh, you're with LL Bean," I'm like, "Yeah." Oh, surprise. And so there's that. There are expectations of what things should be, and even though you don't think that explicitly, it's there because that's what you have been socialized to believe, even if it hasn't been explicit. And so, you have things, the whole idea of implicit bias, and you can also search out the Harvard study. There's a Harvard study on all different types of biases, and so, but that's a test it's free. Look, just do a search, Harvard implicit bias test. And it will tell you a lot about not just race, but, your gender, or not your gender, but gender in general. And other things like intelligence, like what you implicitly think about someone's intelligence based on their face. Like there are all these things. And so I think the more you know, the less you're able to not see. And so in my work, even if it's just one thing that people learn, whatever that one thing is, they're never going to be able to not see it. It's always going to be there. Now, whether you act on that knowledge, that is up to you. That's your choice. That's where you are. That's where you are saying, that's when you are declaring, I'm just going to let this happen. Like the people who were just sitting casually at the restaurant while the protests were happening. I'm just gonna let it happen. I'm gonna drink my Mai Tai or whatever it is, my peach Bellini, and gonna let the protesters. There's a car that just rammed into protesters. Well, we were having a conversation, so you can choose to do that. You can choose to ignore it, or you can act on it. You don't have to go to a protest. You don't have to. You don't have to do whatever it is that you deem too dangerous for you, too physically dangerous for you. You don't have to do that, but you make the decision to do something or nothing. I don't even remember what the question was.
You got it. You got it, and then some. You brought up a really good point of doing something or doing nothing, and I think what's been really frustrating, just from my perspective and looking at our sport, is that a lot of people, I'm not going to call out names, I'm not going to say it's a majority, I don't know the percentage, but there's a lot of people who are doing nothing because they think they're doing something, or it's been really difficult to sort of face that. It's so easy for me to just sit here and go, I'm not racist, or I'm educated in everything I need to know about race, or that sort of thing. It's very easy for someone to just sit there and say that, and that comes from a place of privilege. And I guess I want to say this to live viewers, people who are watching in this chat room, and others, that it is also our responsibility to realize there is a lot going on that you aren't seeing, and to educate yourself. So I hope maybe that is an ultimate message that we can get across in this show, is that I love talking with Mirna. Since the last time we met, it was the first time we met. I knew just from our two performance backgrounds that I am drawn to her talent as a musician and as a stage actress, and that to me is just a whole side note, but also the teaching background, and that's why I'm really thankful that she was able to come on the show today, is to provide some insight into a whole gamut of things that a lot of our audience may not be aware of. I encourage anyone who's watching tonight to educate your damn selves. As hard and as quickly as possible, because you can sit here and say, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. There's fucking a lot wrong. There's a lot wrong. And there has been for a long time.
And saying, I don't know what to do is not an excuse to not do anything. Even if what you say or do is ultimately maybe not the right thing, you're at least doing something, you're trying. I'd rather have a conversation with somebody who's trying and who's trying to understand. Maybe they're not there yet. Maybe they don't understand my life. Maybe they don't understand my experience. But they're listening. And also, I just want to say, nobody cares about your memes. No one cares. It's all performative. So what are you going to do after performing that you are woke, or after performing that you have solidarity, or you're performing that whatever Martin Luther King quote, or whoever Gandhi's quote you're putting up on your Instagram or on your Facebook or on your TikTok or whatever, that is all performative. What I need, and I don't care if I don't see it on social media, I need the actual work to be done in small steps and big steps, big picture, little picture. Because we don't, what does a meme do?
Yeah.
Draw trolls. And then you have to, then you're expending valuable energy with trying to talk to convince people that other people's lives are valuable. That's not where the real work is. The real work is in changing your behavior, changing your actions, changing your thoughts, relearning, unlearning.
Unlearning, I think, is something I've been just seeing a lot more today too. And I think it's an important word right now. We do, again, have some wonderful live questions from our live viewers. Kim, I'll let you get to some of those.
A question from Andrea. Andrea says, Mirna, as a mom, it hit me so hard to hear that Floyd called out for his mama. I also feel like my relationship to own race identity changed when I became a mom. Curious if you experienced the same.
I've always been solidly very Black, aware of my Blackness. And it, wasn't, if that was not changed when I became a mom. What did change was my awareness of how Black men are treated. Even though in my family, I'd seen stuff with my own eyes, and you hear stuff and you just know stuff. I grew up in an urban environment in Brooklyn, and that was when stop and frisk was a thing. It still is a thing, by the way. And just having my son is 17 and he's tall. He's very handsome. And my husband's all right. And, just having those two in my life, just my anxiety level as far as their safety is concerned when they walk out, not necessarily here in Montpelier, because they have other things to do like farming and hiking. But when we go home to New York, when we're in Las Vegas, when we were in Utah, let me tell you about Utah. I love Utah. I don't love it for my son because, he loves to go out and run. He loves to go out and ride his bike and do it and be in his own headspace without mom nagging him and loving on him too much. He just loves to be outside. And then, so we're in Utah. He goes out once and he's like, I can't go back out there because everyone is staring at me and I don't feel safe. So why is that? And so I'll have people that say, oh, well, it's Utah. People stare at everybody who doesn't belong. Oh, no. As a Black person who travels to Utah very frequently, everyone's looking at me. Everyone's looking at my Black skin. Has anything happened to me that causes me concern beyond just being stared at all the time and having people with daggers for eyes? And this is not everyone in Utah, obviously, because I go there a lot. But I don't want my son to have to be in a situation where he's so scared that he doesn't want to go outside. In a place with beautiful natural resources and just the healing properties of the desert,
Mm-hmm.
And so I get really scared for him. One of the reasons I took him out of school in Georgia is because I didn't want him to be down in Georgia. I loved my job and I loved where I worked and I loved that part of Georgia. But I really needed my son to be in somewhere a little bit more progressive and a little bit more, loving and embracing of who he is, which is why we are up north again. And so, yeah, so my identity as a Black woman, as my Blackness is the same as it always has been. But I do worry about my son and my husband and their existence and their ability to live and flourish in this climate.
Do they worry about you?
My son doesn't really worry about me because he doesn't care. And he was just probably dancing in the background because he does that on all my calls. Thinks he's slick. But anyways, but I think my husband worries more about me being in the woods. And he asked me, do I carry a knife? I got a knife. It's, I'm probably not going to use it because I don't really know how to use it. There's that. But my family in Brooklyn, because I have always chosen to live in predominantly white areas because that's where the work that I want to do is. You like trail running? But so they worry about me, just be careful. When I bring my mom up to New England, once we were vacationing in Maine, and so she always counts the Black people. And I'm sort of used to it because, look, I went to boarding school. And then I went to Oberlin, and then, and then my life now. It's been 20 years. But and she's like, oh, I see. Okay, I see 3 Black people. Okay, all right. And then she'll ask me, so is it okay for us to be here? we weren't even renting a house. One of my assistants' family has a cottage on the beach, and so we were there. And so like, and of course I'm worrying about, well, people are going to think that we're like not supposed to be here. There's a whole bevy of research on Black people as nuisances in white spaces, just Blackness as nuisance. Again, I encourage you to look up that research. And that is always, anytime we enter a white space, that is always, whether it's trail running, whether it's, hiking, whether it's just being on a beach in Maine, we're always thinking about that. And that actually has a negative physiological effect on us. Mm-hmm. A lot of Black people have hypertension. Not because we have awful lifestyles, it's because we're always worried about racism. Racism is a part of our everyday existence. And the more that people who don't have to experience that acknowledge that, the better it's going to get for us and for everybody. And there are also other physiological things that happen because of racism. And a lot of that research has been here forever. But now people are actually reading it and we're trying to understand it. And I encourage you to use this time to do that research on your own. There's so many wonderful researchers. I was just on Global Sports Matters. I need some coffee, but I was on there are all these like amazing intellectuals from ASU. Talking about their research, one Dr. Rashawn Ray, out of ASU, who was doing like all of these fellowships and stuff like that. He wrote this paper called "Do Black People Exercise in My Neighborhood?" and broke it down. By what, like middle class neighborhoods, like more sort of urban, lower middle class, working class neighborhoods, and where Black people felt okay to exercise. And this was before Ahmaud Arbery happened. And so like there is research out there. It's, believe it's out there because it is, and then look for it and utilize it to obviously to learn, but to unlearn all the bullshit that you have been learning about why Black people don't exercise and why Black people don't go to the gym and why Black people don't want to go to the doctor. All of it, it's real. I've experienced it. My son has experienced it, my husband, my entire family, and we experience it every day. Please acknowledge that. Please know that. Please don't question our experiences. Because why lie? It's happening.
Yeah.
We probably have time for a couple more questions with Mirna. One from Ingen in the chat room that I definitely want to ask.
Yeah, I already pulled another similar one from Elizabeth. But Ingen asked, Mirna, is there anything concrete that we as a community can do to make Black people feel welcome in the trail community?
That's always a really hard question. And I've answered it in many different ways. I have been the recipient of a lot of goodness in the trail running community. And I think, just being invited to races with no expectations of me educating anybody, no expectations of me speaking or whatever. Hey, can you just come and enjoy a race? Yeah, like it might be a larger reason. It might be, like we really want to work on diversifying our clients or the people that run our races. And honestly, when I see other Black people at races, I'm like, okay, hey. It's like when I look at my window, right? Remember I live in Vermont, right? And whenever I see a Black person walking, I'm like, oh, hey. And there's a certain level of comfort. We may not ever talk. We may not even acknowledge each other, but it's something. And so like, I think it's important to just like be invitational. And like, you can't do anything at trail races if you don't do anything in your life. Right. I did say in this other interview that running is a microcosm of all of our societal ills and good. So things that are going to happen outside of running are going to happen in running. Right. And so if you're not invitational, if you don't have a broad swath of friends that, where the swath is broad racially, ethnically, socioeconomically, you can't always hit everybody, every part of everyone's identity, but you can try, you can step out of your circle. And so yeah, like I guess I'm not going to answer that for like with specifically with trail running in mind, but just with everything, look at who are your friends? Who do you hang out with? Who do you do things socially with? Who do you work with? How diverse is your workplace? And I'm not just talking about race right now. Like I'm talking about diverse in every way. What kind of steps has your workplace tried to execute with diversity in mind, or have they not done anything because we can't find the right candidate, or they're not enough kids, or that person is not a cultural fit? Red flag. We know that coded language, so and so there are all these things. So like, forget about trail running. Look at your own life. Look at your life. Race directors, look at your own life. Who is in your life? Who is not in your life?
I think that's an important question. As race directors, as trail runners, I don't want this conversation to end, and it shouldn't. I am so thankful to have someone like Mirna in the universe, and someone like Mirna that's able to join us on this show and to allow us to ask some of these questions and allow our live viewers to comment freely and question freely here in the chat room as well. The protests that are happening outside our personal doors and outside doors across the country, and the things that are happening around us right now in this time, is there anything that you hope people take from this and utilize in their own lives?
Examine your own privilege, especially white people right now. That is your job. Examine your privilege, learn about it. And then one act, reach out to somebody at your job. It may be awkward. That's okay. We're all feeling really awkward right now. Reach out to people. Maybe we can't really invite anybody over to dinner right now. But but that might be too much for somebody. But continue being invitational in your life. Invite conversation. Invite people to invite the challenge. Don't invite people to challenge you, but just invite the challenge that this time offers, and change one behavior. Try to look into one thought that you've always had about certain types of people, and ask yourself why you have that thought. It's hard. It's hard. It's not easy, but you really have to, and I said this in my book, you really have to lean into the discomfort, because it is not a comfortable place to be, but only in that space of discomfort will there be learning.
I'm surprised to see some of the comments that we've had in the chat room tonight. I think that's interesting. But it's also telling that I think we all...
I'm not surprised to see some of the comments that we've seen in the chat room.
I think if anything, it's a sign that it's not even close to being done. And like the education that we need to do for ourselves across the board is, maybe just beginning, if it's even started. Our guest tonight, Mirna Valerio, has been wonderful and patient, and we cannot thank her enough. Mirna, can you please just again let people know where they can go to sign up for your Racism for Beginners class, which I think is going to enlighten a lot of people in a really good, positive way,
Sure.
where can they go? Where can they find out?
I actually haven't posted it on my Instagram yet, but it's definitely on my Facebook. I will post it on my Instagram very soon after this in my stories with a direct swipe up link to the actual class.
Awesome.
It is called Introduction to Identity, Social Justice, and Anti-Racism, specifically for our white friends who want to do a little bit more learning in a very, very facilitated, physically safe atmosphere that is built for your learning and your success.
Beautiful.
I love it.
I love it. And again, our guest tonight, Mirna Valerio, aka the Mirnovator, just a wonderful person to have on the show. And again, very, very thankful to have her even say yes to come and have this conversation right now. And Kimasabe in the chat room. Good to see you again, Kimasabe, longtime viewer. Lean into the discomfort. Trail runners, we're good at that. And it's true. Ultra runners know what it's like to lean into that pain and to get through it. And right now, I think that's what we need to do. There's no after show tonight because I wanted everything that we talked about to be available to everybody. So to our Patreon subscribers and everything like that, we'll see you tomorrow during Daily Brew. We've been doing live stream shows every single day since the beginning of lockdown. So we are on episode 61 tomorrow, which is crazy. But we've been going live every single day. And tonight's live show is this. There is no after show. I will post this to Patreon, though, so we can let the discussion continue there. But again, support Mirna. She does so much for the trail running community and inspiring people of all ages and backgrounds to take up ultra running. She's a badass. And let me ask this, Mirna, before we actually to end the show here.
Sure.
How has training been going now that the snow is off the ground? Like, have you been able to get out there and get mileage? Or are you injured? You mentioned injury.
I was training. I was so good. And my coach was so proud and happy. And then now my patella is doing its own thing. Now I'm in a knee brace and it's fine because everything has been canceled. So I can rehab and I can,
Nice.
Get my endurance training on the bike. So there you go. Thanks, patella.
As someone who also had an injury during the beginning of this,
As someone who is currently injured with a swollen ankle right now, who rode my bike earlier today.
it's like it's okay to be injured right now because there aren't any races really to train for. And again, I also want to point out, I wrote this in the chat room, but I'll say it out loud. And that's that at no time during tonight's stream did we censor any comments in the chat room. So if you are watching this after the live stream, the chat is unedited and it is exactly how it was. So
there's some comments that YouTube just holds for review.
Some comments YouTube holds
touching it
because of the content of the comments. We haven't touched our keyboards other than me commenting on not censoring any comments, and that is a purposeful approach to tonight's episode. So anyone watching the archive version, you'll be able to see the entire live chat by just clicking live chat. And anyone listening to the podcast, you can go to the YouTube channel and you can rewatch the entire show. We, again, can't thank our guests tonight enough. Mirna Valerio, a.k.a. the Mirnovator, continuing to educate and inspire.
AKA my future best friend.
Future best friend. I want to be best friend right now.
I think after the last show, I was like, we need to be wine buddies. Now that wine's off the table, I don't care. I still future best friend.
Just for the next week, dude. Just for the next week.
Okay.
Well, you guys can be wine buddies. We'll be cookie buddies.
Performance art buddies.
Yeah, no, I love that. That'd be amazing. All right, so we're going to wrap up tonight's show. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into Ginger Runner Live 310. It took us 309 episodes to have an episode like this that I think should have happened a long time ago. But we are just so thankful to have people like Mirna in this world and helping so many. So thank you so much, everybody. We hope that you stay safe. Get out there, train as hard as you want, virtually race harder, and party the hardest. We appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ginger.